start with another speaker?
Wait for a minute. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. 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 He's joining back. Let us take 2-3 minutes more.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Alan Phil has he's trying to join back in a couple of minutes. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So please stay tuned for two more sessions to go today. Uh, so we have a wonderful session from Alan Phil. He's talking about leadership. So if you have any questions, yeah, Andrew. Okay, so hi, Andrew.
Hi, Shaq. How are you?
Doing good.
Good.
So,
You threw me then. I wasn't expecting to be on stage straight away then.
actually, Alan Phil got disconnected. He had 5 minutes. If he joins, then he can conclude. No problem. Yeah.
Of
I
course. No, I
understand
know.
with
I
you.
know Alan very well. Anyway, I've worked with Alan quite a lot in the last year personally. So yes.
Okay. So yeah. So let us, Praveen, if Alan Phil join, please just bring him to the stage. Okay. So meanwhile, let us do a quick round of introduction to Andrew. Okay. So thank you, Andrew. Hope all is good. Nice to see you again.
You too.
So we talk about blue ocean strategy, open up new market spaces from Andrew Constable. Okay, so it's Andrew is a seasoned strategy and innovation expert, servicing and managing partner at Visualize Solutions. With over 25 years of experience, he supports global firms in strategy formulation, execution, and innovation using frameworks like Balance Scorecard, OKRs, XPP, Blue Ocean Strategy. His consulting work has helped companies like IBM, Roche achieve measurable results and business impact. Yeah, very fast. Okay. So, over to you, Andrew. So you can do a quick round of introduction. So all is set for you.
Okay, shall I share my screen? Get going.
Yeah.
Okay, give me a second. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's coming up. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, I'll get going then. Okay, so thanks first of all for inviting me to speak about the subject blue ocean strategy, and I think it's an interesting topic. It's also something which is heard about, but not that many people actually understand what blue ocean strategy is. We hear a lot of things like blue ocean thinking and blue sky thinking, and this, that, and the other. But blue ocean strategy is really what this image on the screen is showing, how you got competition in the red circle and you are the blue business, and you're going out there into the market and you're looking for new opportunity. And when we think about this whole thing about this red and the blue circle, we need to think about it in these two sort of areas. So if you think on the right hand side, that is a blue ocean. It's full of fish, and fish could be customers. Okay. And what we're trying to think about here is there's plenty of opportunity in this space. But on the left-hand side, we have the bloody red water with the sharks in it, who have taken all the food, i.e. taken all your customers, and the competition is really, really brutal in this environment. So I just want you to keep in your mind those two areas, first of all, the blue ocean with plenty of opportunity and the red ocean, which is full of sharks fighting over food, basically, in the ocean. And this is where this term blue and red ocean comes from, okay? And when we think about these two sides, we can think about it like this. So if we look at the red circles on the screen, that's our known market space. That's our known industries. So maybe you're in the steel industry, as an example. That could be industry A. So it's very much known. We have boundaries in this, and we understand the market. We understand the customer. We understand everything we normally would understand. It's pretty well known. But we need to also think about how can we look at other market space, which is not inside those industries and allows us to grow. And this is where the blue ocean strategy theory and method can work. And for this, we start looking at areas which are potentially outside our industry, maybe adjacent to our industries, or maybe completely miles away from where we currently are. And the whole purpose of it is really to start thinking about how can we find growth, how can we find new markets, and how can we break the issue that we always see in business strategy between being a cost leader and being a differentiator. And this is what blue ocean strategy can do, because what blue ocean strategy is really doing is creating new markets. And it focuses on a number of things. It focuses on the innovation. Okay, so we have to think differently about how we're going to do something. We also target non-customers. So these are customers who don't currently trade with you, okay, who potentially don't even think about your industry, your products, your services. But can we find a way of engaging them? And it allows us to also start thinking about it from three angles. So the first method we think about, or the first theory we think about, is something called value innovation. And that's where we create new values for customers and also reducing cost at the same time. The second principle we think about is this reconstruction of boundaries. And for this, we start thinking about the industry, and then we start thinking about how can we compete on different factors to address or to service certain types of customers. And this allows us also then to start thinking about how can we expand our market to focus on the wider market of non-customers where there's plenty of opportunity. And if you think about it, if you look at the drawing on the top right-hand corner of the screen, you can see there, the blue side, plenty of fish, plenty in there. The red side, very little in the way of customers. Okay, it's all the competitors have got their hooks in the water, and they're all trying to find your customers. So that's the first thing we want to think about is this two sides, the red and the blue ocean. And when we think about this as well, we need to also think about a couple of different points. So if we look at the red ocean, where the competition is there, where you have everyone's fighting over the same scraps in the ocean, that is really called a market competing strategy. Okay, like I said, you're fighting over the same customers. It's the same market, the same customers, the same industries, the same geographic areas, the same demographics, could be lots of different things. On the blue side, we actually call this market creating strategy, because you are creating something which wasn't there before. And I have some good examples to show you how this can be done as we go through the session. The other point we need to think about when we start thinking about these two different sides of the ocean, the red and the blue, red being the market competing and blue being the market creating strategy, is when we look at the traditional literature out there in the market, on the red side, which is the market competing side, a lot of people will say structure shapes strategy. And if we think about going back years and years ago now, Michael Porter came out with this, and he said that a strategy is shaped by its industry structure. Okay, and we start thinking about the 5 forces framework, which Michael Porter developed, where we looked at competition, we looked at supplier power, buyer power, substitutes, and barriers to entry. Whereas with the blue ocean strategy, we're now thinking about strategy shapes the structure of how we're going to try and approach this customer base or this part of the market. So there's a fundamental shift in how we have to think about this, and as we develop our services and our products and our businesses into the market. It's also very interesting when we start thinking about this, is that we can't just do this without some core fundamental principles that we need to think about when we're developing our strategy structure construct. Oops. So if we just break this down further, so if we look at the red and the blue ocean, on the left, as I've already said, the red ocean competes in existing market space, where the blue ocean is creating the uncontested market space. The red's all about competition. The blue is about making competition irrelevant. The red ocean is about exploiting demand, and the blue is about creating and capturing new demand. And remember, that's all about attracting potential non-customers to what you do. When we look at the red ocean, we have to make this trade-off between a value and a cost. And that's normally called cost leadership and differentiation. Okay, and a business will compete on one of those as they start addressing their strategy to the market. With the blue ocean, we break that cost value trade-off. So these are some fundamental things to think about as we start developing it. Now, blue ocean strategy has been around for quite a few years now. It's been around for probably pushing 30 years, I would think, or 20 years, sorry, I should say 20 years. And it's really been released through 3 main books. The one on the right-hand side, Blue Ocean Strategy, that was the one that started it all. And you can see from here, it's sold over 4.5 million copies worldwide. And it really fundamentally changed how we looked at strategy in organizations. It also was supplemented a few years later by another book called Blue Ocean Shift, which is very much more practical. It says, how do you actually complete this thing called a blue ocean shift? How do you actually move from where you are today to where do you want to go in the future? So it's more of a step-by-step process about how you could do this. And the third book, which they released last year, is about innovating and achieving growth without displacing industries, companies, and jobs. Okay, it's a slightly different slant on how they do this. But these 3 books are really fundamental to the blue ocean strategy concept. And as we start thinking about taking this forward in our own businesses. So if you haven't read them already, I definitely recommend to check them out because they are fantastic books. So when we think about some of the principles for blue ocean strategy, on top of what I've already said, we think about, the first thing we can think about is this theory is grounded in data. So the researchers analyzed over 150 strategic moves across 30 industries over 100 years. And then since then, there's been lots of case studies out there from various industries and various companies which have implemented blue ocean strategy to allow them to go and fish in an area where there's plenty of customers. It also provides that step-by-step approach, which can be a challenge for some businesses who find strategy quite abstract, quite difficult to try and think implementing. And I'm a great believer that I like processes and frameworks to be fairly simple, because to me, frameworks and methods are there to help with our thinking and to help with our dialogue and how we actually engage in strategy. It also creates a win-win as well, potentially for the business, because it aligns the value that they can bring to the market with the profit they can actually achieve as well, because they can lower their costs. So it's really some really important parts we have to think about when we're developing a blue ocean approach. But at this stage, if you just think about those different areas, we think about the red ocean as a market competing area where the structure shapes the strategy, and the blue ocean is very much where there's plenty of fish. We can go out, we can find new markets, find new customers, and our strategy will shape our structure. But behind all this, we also have key principles, okay? And the first one we have to talk about is, as I've just mentioned, is this term called value innovation. And like I said, traditionally, businesses would think about competing on two ways. They would think about differentiation, where you offer superior and unique value, and low cost, reducing cost by eliminating and reducing various parts or elements in your business. But what the authors of Blue Ocean Strategy came out and backed this with data was they said, what we could do, we could balance both sides here. We could look at reducing cost to become a cost leader, and then we could increase the buyer value, okay, by creating factors and raising factors that the industry has potentially never offered. So this is a really important thing to think about. We also need to think about, when we do this, is we need to think about focusing on that, creating that leap in value for customers and the business. So we're not just trying to make incremental changes here. We're trying to make a significant shift in how we actually do something and who we target in our business. And this will also allow us to challenge our industry assumptions, because we all know businesses are built on assumptions. Businesses don't always question things they should question. So part of this is challenging our assumptions and thinking about how can we do things differently? How can we focus on those non-customers? And how can we make something called a blue ocean shift as we move forward? And a good way of showing this, I think Brian Gladden, who was talking about earlier, maybe showing you an example of this. But we can use this tool. This is an example of a tool. This is only one tool in the whole portfolio of products and tools which Blue Ocean Strategy uses. But we can use something called the Strategy Canvas. And the Strategy Canvas is a really powerful tool to use that allows us to, first of all, capture the current state of play within the market. And then secondly, we can use it to start thinking about how can we change the mix of how we compete in the market. So if I look at this screen for you now, what we've done here is we've consolidated the industry on competing factors, which would be at the bottom of the screen here. And that could be things like cost, it could be speed, it could be technology, it could be whatever you would want, okay? And we find these competing factors out by speaking to customers, doing some research, and really understanding the specific customers you are going to look for. And we would plot them along the bottom of the screen. Then on the left-hand side, we would then think about the offering. Is this something which is a high factor or a low factor on our offering? And the best way to do this is to take the industry competitors that you have currently and think about consolidating them into one red curve. Okay, and we can clearly plot this on the screen. Then in time, you can start developing this thing called a blue ocean strategic move. And from that, we can then make decisions on, okay, how are we going to compete in the market? Okay, are we going to raise or lower our offering around certain competing factors? And what this should allow us to do, it should allow us to stand out in the market, but it should also be very, very easy to communicate this to customers, to investors, to employees, whoever you want to communicate with, because as you can see on the screen now, you can clearly see there's a difference between the blue and the red line. Okay, so this is another really important part of this blue ocean strategy canvas, is about communication, because as I'm sure Alan mentioned in his previous speech, you know, communication, dialogue is usually very poor in organizations, especially around strategy. So if we can actually find a way of actually showing to our employees, to our business, that how we compete differently in the market, that's going to make it much more stronger. So let's bring a tangible example for this, show you how this would actually work. So I'm sure everyone's heard or watched the Indian Premier League. And the Indian Premier League started in 2008. And it really started because, well, a number of reasons. But one of those reasons was that 2020 cricket was becoming very popular across the world. And they thought, okay, how can we bring that to the Indian market? They also had competition from other T20 cricket leagues in the world, where they would offer maybe more money, better TV rights and other things. They thought, how can we do this in India? They also thought about how could we engage cricket fans in a new modern way of doing things? Because I'm a cricket fan. I've been a cricket fan for 30 years. And I still love the test cricket, the white clothing and the red ball. I still love the traditional cricket. But a lot of people don't want to spend 5 days watching cricket. A lot of people find it quite slow and quite boring now. So they were thinking, how can we look at the younger market potentially who would find cricket really interesting, how we compete with other areas in the market? They also thought about how could we take cricket away from being individual clubs to being more city-based. Okay, so cities compete against each other in the league. And that turns cricket to more of a community event, you could call it, because they got ties to the city and how they actually work. And then lastly, they brought in business icons of the world, famous ex-players like Sachin Tendulkar to be part of the process. But they also importantly brought in Bollywood stars as well. And I'm sure there's some Indian people on the call. You know, Bollywood is a huge part of India. So they brought Bollywood stars into the market as well. And if we plot that on our strategy canvas of how they built this value proposition for their strategy, we could see at the bottom here, we have the competing factors that they thought about. So it'd be anywhere from price to spectators' time invested to the fast-paced game. And as you can see here, they looked at domestic cricket leagues, not just the Indian League, but other leagues. And they thought, okay, how are we going to be on the spectators' time invested? Well, 2020 cricket can be finished in maybe 4 hours. Okay, that's completely different for other types of cricket. They also thought, how can we glamorize the players? Okay, how can we potentially change them into almost superstars? Now, in India, I know cricket is like a religion, but in some parts of the world, it's not. So how can we start thinking about that and also attract rights, TV rights, overseas deals and such like to really raise the profile of those players? And also domestic cricket, one-day cricket or test cricket is a lot slower compared to the fast-paced game of 2020. So where that blue circle is, that's really where 2020 and domestic cricket leagues kind of were matched. But what Indian Premier League did is they thought about, okay, how else can we enhance our league, to attract more people, more spectators, better players, and such like to the market, and ultimately bigger crowds. So what they did, they brought entertainment in. So they had things like concerts at the events, and they had stars at the events, and they had big TV deals, and they had fireworks going off, and they had all of this kind of thing. So that was something they raised that. They created this new area for cricket. They also brought in those Bollywood stars, like I said. So they raised that high in what they were doing. They wanted to be connected to people out there who really were well respected in the Indian market, and also potentially known worldwide as well. And then they looked at the club culture. And like I said, they went away from small clubs to more city-based franchise, you could say, cricket teams. And you can see they created that as well. And then from that, really since 2008, the Indian Premier League is become a very, very strong and very important league in the world. TV deals are very good. The publicity across the world is very good. The crowds are very good. And you have a lot of top players who try to go there because obviously money is a big part of that, but also the fact that it's everything else was built with this. Obviously better TV deals and such like increase the revenue they make, which means they can actually start paying players for what they're potentially worth. So that's an example of how you can actually start just mapping out the different areas when you're building out your strategy canvas. Okay, but behind this is obviously a lot of analysis you would do first. This is just the front end. And when we start thinking about on the left-hand side, are we going to reduce something? So we're not going to invest so much time in it potentially, or money, or are we going to create it like they did with the entertainment and the Bollywood stars? Or are we going to reduce this? Okay. And for this, we can use a technique or a framework called the 4 actions framework. And as you can see here, it's based around those 4 main actions. So the first one we can think about is, can we eliminate certain factors that we've taken for granted, or an industry has taken for granted? Okay, can we eliminate it completely? Can we take it out? Another example, there's a famous circus in the world called Cirque du Soleil. Cirque du Soleil is one of the main case studies that Blue Ocean Strategy uses. Well, they eliminated from the circus animals, okay, lions, tigers, elephants, and such like, because the market changed. Consumers weren't interested in seeing animals in circuses anymore. They eliminated it completely, and they replaced it with other factors, okay, and that's exactly what they used to do. But you can also, what factors can you reduce? So do you need to keep everything to the way it's always been in industry, or can you reduce it because customers don't value it the same way that you think they do? Also, can you raise certain factors? Can you start thinking about how you can enhance it better and try to make something really stand out in what you're offering? And then lastly, how can you create those factors? Think about what I said about Bollywood, bringing Bollywood in for the cricket. Think about how they could bring in city-based franchises and how they brought in entertainment at the Indian Premier League. So this is a couple of frameworks that you could actually use to start doing your Blue Ocean, or using some of the Blue Ocean tools around strategy canvas, plotting where you are in the market in competition compared to competition, and how can you make that change by potentially using something like the 4 actions framework to help you with this. But these are only 2 tools. There's about 14 different tools which can be used within a Blue Ocean shift, as we call it. And this is where you kind of start. So what we need to think about is, we need to think about how we can expand that curve on the left-hand side from the fierce competition, where there's potentially no differentiation of value, which basically means that everyone's fighting over cost, where we can actually shift from the red curve to the blue curve, creating this Blue Ocean shift, where we increase the value, the differentiation we provide customers, and we also reduce or provide better cost leadership and reduce our costs. And that will help us create this blue ocean shift as we start moving forward. And like I said, there's around, I think there's more tools than this now, but this is just an example of some of the tools you could use. Value innovation, I've already spoken about and shown you what that means. Strategy canvas, I've shown you, but it allows you to plot how you compete in the market. And do you see if you are competing against everyone else in the same way? If you are, you're probably in the red ocean and you need to move out that ocean at some point. We also use a tool called the buyer utility map. And this is where you can actually go out and you can start thinking about what's important to a customer. Okay, so you interview customers, you start talking to customers, you start observing customers, and you can start thinking about how you can use this framework. We also think about tiers of customers, from customers who are pretty much about to leave us or leave the industry, to non-customers, and to customers who completely never thought about using our services or products in the future. We can also start thinking about how we're going to map our portfolio in the business as well of products or services. So we use that thing called a PMS map at the bottom, and that allows us to say, are these business units or these businesses, if you're doing it at corporate level, are they in the red ocean? Are they in the blue ocean currently? If they're in the red ocean, that could be a good place for you to start thinking about how can we be different? How can we make ourselves completely different in the market so customers can actually see the value about what we're bringing to them, and we're not just becoming a me too business or service or product like a lot of companies out there. And then lastly, another part we think about is this thing called fair process at the end. Okay, and this is called a blue ocean fair. So in this, we start displaying everything we've done to the business. We start looking at how we're going to compete differently. And we get people to walk around and start talking about all of this in the business to start allowing us to start thinking about how we can make that potential shift. So these are just some tools. Check out Blue Ocean Strategy's website and you'll see loads of tools and case studies on there. So just at a very high level, just some of the, again, very simplified version of the process. But you could, first of all, at the bottom, you get started with this. And with this, we start plotting our business, our portfolio on this Pioneer, Migrator, and Settler or PMS map. This allows us to understand which businesses are potentially in the red ocean and where do we want to focus. Then we can go to number 2 and we can understand where we are today. How do we compete against everyone else in the market? And I guarantee if you did this, it would be an interesting exercise for you to do, because you may find across your team that you actually are exactly the same as everyone else in the market. But it gives you a good way of trying to differentiate yourself and start thinking about how we can differentiate ourselves. Once you've kind of baselined it, you can then go out into number 3 and you can imagine where you could be. For this, we could start looking at customer needs. We could start talking to customers, interviewing, doing research, observation. We could then think about the different bands of customers we would talk to, and also non-customers, people who don't use our products or services or not even our industry. Once you've done that, that's when you would then bring in that 4 actions framework and something called a 6-path framework as well. And that would allow you to start reducing and raising and creating and eliminating certain factors. And then from that, you go to stage 5, which is your to-be canvas. How are you going to compete in the market? How are you going to make better returns? How are you going to differentiate? And how are you going to be a cost leader in the market? So that's a quick example of the process and how we would follow this if we were doing it in a business. Again, behind this, there's lots more detail. This is just a very high-level view of everything I'm talking about here. So let's bring another example in. So Apple, everyone knows Apple, okay? So very old logo on the screen from 1990s, I think, with the traditional Apple colors. But if we look at Apple and we look at the mobile phone industry in the early 2000s, there was lots of different phones out there. You know, BlackBerry was a main player. I was a big fan of BlackBerry. I used to love BlackBerry phones, and they were a fantastic player in the market. But there was really an arms race in the early 2000s about making products more technology advanced. Okay, making them much more advanced and more focused on selling the handsets and add-ons. And there was two types of real phones. There was a feature phone and there was a smartphone. And what happened is that the carriers, which is still happening today to a lot of extent, face pressure, okay, to reduce their pricing, and also they were making smaller margins on voice calls. And this really dictated how handset makers built, how they built it, what they built, and at what cost. So the market was flooded with lots of Me Too handsets and services. As you can see on the screen, they all look fairly similar, but they're all different, 3 different makes: Palm on the left, Motorola, I think, in the middle, and BlackBerry on the right. And if we look at how the value curve looked at the time for this, we can see here that there was a slight difference, as you can see. The smartphone on the PC-like performance at the time, it was so different. It also focused much more heavily on business applications. It also had less buttons, potentially. Okay, some didn't, like BlackBerry, but as a general rule. But there was less models out there in the market. Okay, and a feature phone was considerably cheaper to use and to buy. So if we look at this, how did Apple start thinking about applying these frameworks to develop the iPhone? So if we look at this example here, this is the 4 paths framework that I shown you a second ago. The first thing they did for iPhone is they eliminated models. They developed really one model at the time. So they weren't going out, they developed lots and lots of different ones under the same brand. They were releasing just one model. Now that's changed now slightly. They've released different versions of the same phone, different sizes and such like, but fundamentally they're all pretty similar. They raised the mobile internet access on the phone. They made it much better to use the internet. It was almost, at the time, was almost like using your PC. The iPhone had better style and entertainment features. It could connect to YouTube. It was very, very good as soon as it came out. Also, it was very intuitive as a product, had much better usage and simplicity. They reduced the number of physical buttons, and they embedded business applications into this. And they also created the App Store, which was a very important part of their whole business model and how they really grew their business, because that produced lots of different apps which customers would find useful, and also allowed people to monetize their apps they developed, and lots of businesses have been built off the back of that. So that's an example of how Apple did this and how they sort of used the 4 actions framework. And again, this is a very much a high level view of how they did it. You go into much more detail in real life. And if we plot it of how they did things, you can clearly see here, we've got the 2 colors, the red and the orange, which was the feature phone and the smartphone. And you can see there what they actually did. They actually, first of all, they increased the price of the phone. Okay, well, we know Apple's not a low cost provider. They are very much a high priced, they produce high priced items. But they also reduced their models. As you can see at the bottom, they put the dots right to the floor. Okay, so 1 product was released. Number of physical buttons was released. They also had, at the time, they weren't quite as powerful as some of the other smartphones on the market, but they were focusing much more on other things. They also had better capabilities around mobile internet access, but where they really changed was on the right-hand side. So they raised the style and fun. It used to be the case that an iPhone was very much part of your own personal branding, that you had an iPhone and people thought you were into fashion and such like, and they were fun compared to standard BlackBerries, which was known as boring at the time. They also, once the learning curve had gone, as far as having no buttons, they were much easier to use. So that allowed us to think about, okay, they massively changed that. And then lastly, the big one really was the creation of the App Store. Now, other phones like BlackBerry had a store as well, but it was nowhere near the same as the App Store when it was developed. And that was developed in mind with this whole ecosystem approach to how they were going to develop their business. So that's an example of how you can use the strategy canvas, how you can use the four paths framework to actually think about how you can eliminate, reduce, raise, and create on products, and how you can apply this to your business. One area to think about, though, is a blue ocean is not blue forever. Other competitors are going to come out in the market. We only have to think about other competitors out there in the market. People like Uber. When Uber started, there wasn't much ride apps out there to get taxis. What happened? There's now hundreds. Okay, so again, you have to reinvent as you go forward, and you have to continually look at your strategy and develop it and assess it and how you're performing. And it's the same with most products and services out there. Failure to reinvent yourselves, as like Brian would have said earlier on his business model refresh, failure to reinvent yourself will generally mean that you probably won't be here in 5, 10, 15 years as a business. So always think about how you can compete differently and how you can start focusing on different factors which customers value. And that's the important part. It's not what you think, it's what the customers think, because they're the ones who are going to be buying your products. So last slide for me. So again, just a very high level. Blue Ocean strategy creates new market space. You're focusing on non-customers a lot of the time, customers who wouldn't even consider using your products or services, or a variation of your products or services, which allows you then to tap into this value innovation curve, where we start thinking about how we can be different, i.e. how can we differentiate in the market, but also how can we lower cost. And we do that by using things like the 4-path framework, where we start eliminating, reducing, raising, and creating factors. Also, there's lots of tools in the Blue Ocean toolbox. Okay, you can use. The most famous ones is probably the strategy canvas and the 4 actions framework. But it's not to say if you did start using some of this, you would have to use all 14 tools. Okay, it's very much a toolbox. You open it, you find the tools which are relevant for you at a certain period. It may be that the strategy canvas is something you could use pretty quickly in your business. And I use it a lot as a standalone tool with clients when I'm working with them. And lastly, again, I've mentioned it already, but targeting non-customers allows you to explore those new opportunities, drive growth, and ultimately profitability, which we know is the lifeblood of a business. So if you found that interesting, or if you wanted to connect with me, just send me a message on LinkedIn. I'm on there pretty much every day. So I usually talk about similar things to do with business strategy and business innovation. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Yep. Yep. So you have 5 more minutes. So let me look for questions.
Yeah, any questions or anything you want me to talk about, just let me know, Shep.
I'm just trying to see any questions. Yeah. So actually, you have explained very nicely about the concept and also strategy canvas. That is very important. So we also hear from Brian that strategy canvas can be done for the current situation as is, and also can be done for to be.
Yeah.
So that will give us a focus. So it will be, all the leadership team can stay on the same page. So that is something which is very, very useful. Yeah. So any final takeaways, Andrew?
Yeah, I think you're totally right about the strategy canvas. It's very much, it's a great way of, remember, some people in businesses are very much, they like to see things. They're very visual. And I think if you use something like a strategy canvas as a starting point and understanding your competing factors in your industry, and then you start plotting it, it's very clear straight away that you can see if you're the same or you're different in the market. And I think that's a real, we call that a light bulb moment or an aha moment, where customers think, wow, okay, we are the same as everyone else. Now I see why we're not making money. Now I see why we're fighting over customers all the time. So that's why we do that. So no, for me, don't worry. And again, lastly, for me, don't worry about following the full process. You can pull tools out of the toolbox, and you can use them like the strategy canvas or other tools as you move forward.
Fantastic. Now, this blue ocean strategy is definitely helpful for people to focus on strategy formulation. Still, it does not have to be in conflict with any balance scorecard or OKR. So you do
No,
the strategy formulation, and maybe for execution you can do the balance scorecard or any other
yeah,
framework.
100%. The different stages. Yeah, about the scorecard and OKRs are more about execution, whereas this is more about where you're going to play in the market, where you're going to play, and how you're going to compete, what you're going to compete with, what factors you're going to use in the market. And then once you've done that, you build your strategic plan and you go forward and you implement it. So yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. So anything else you would like to brief quick about? You gave very nice examples. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think again, I think go to the, I didn't invent blue ocean strategy, as I said in that, it's not my theory, it's something I use. I think if you're interested in reading more about it, go to Blue Ocean Strategy's website and look at the case studies on the website. They have case studies from Disney, from Nintendo, from Microsoft of how they've used it. So you may find that your industry, you may think, well, we can never use this. We're an industry that never changes. Well, first of all, every industry changes,
Hmm.
but it also, you could find industries where there's
Yeah.
a case study which will help you.
So there is a new book from them, the Blue Ocean Shift. I
Yes,
recently had it. Yeah, yeah. So that's excellent add-on
that's it.
for them. Yeah. So great. So we have 4 more minutes, Andrew. So would you like to give any insights and advice for the managers how to use Blue Ocean methodology for their specific cases, and how to, if somebody is not doing any strategy analysis or strategy formulation, what is your advice, especially for
Yeah.
mid-size segment?
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is that these are frameworks. These are ways of getting your thinking going. They're not. I'm not a great believer in saying you have to use a certain framework all the time to do something. So I prefer to understand what the business wants to do. Does it want to create new market demand? Does it want to go out there and increase its profits? Does it want to have a better, stronger financial strategy? Does it want to do this? Does it want to do that? And then I think about the framework I'm going to use. But ultimately, for me, it comes down to don't assume, don't assume what customers want. Spend time and the effort going out there and speaking to customers and understanding those contributing factors which they value. Okay. And actually spend time physically speaking to them, seeing them in their buildings, their offices, how they shop, whatever you're doing in your work, and then apply that. And also have a mind of a 5-year-old child as well. Always be inquisitive when you're doing this.
Mhm.
Always be inquisitive, always thinking about, just because something's been done in an industry for so long doesn't mean you always have to compete on that. Maybe there's things which customers really can't stand, but you feel that you have to do that because everyone else does it. Or about removing certain things,
Mm.
uh, as we go through this. So, like I said, it's a very nice tool, but it's also a starting point, mapping out how you compete in the market, which allows that dialogue. And believe me, you will get more out of that session than actually someone just presenting a PowerPoint slide with loads of bullet points on. You will get much more from mapping it.
Okay, so in their website you have the case studies, which is very useful. That's what
They
you're
have
saying.
loads. They have loads on the Blue Ocean's website. Yeah,
Because it
yeah,
looks obvious. Yeah, the concept is very good. So how to apply? Because there are different things. Okay, so mid-size startups is different. Mid-size companies are different. Large organizations are different. Okay, so you can explore blue oceans for any industry or any company,
yeah.
whatever.
If you're a smaller company, you could apply it across the whole business. If you're a small company, maybe one product or service offering or one main product service offering. But if you're a company with multiple business units and multiple different
Mhm.
products and services, you could actually pick a product or services that you can use, and you would just trial it in an area where the business department, maybe a service or product, has been struggling. Maybe it's losing market share every year. Maybe profitability is dropping all the time. So they're just thinking about doing everything what competitors are in the market. Can we think about how we can change this to make it stickier and better for customers, but also reduce our costs and hopefully increase our profit?
Mhm. So did you try to apply this blue ocean strategy to any company on your own? So how did you?
Yeah,
Mm.
definitely. So so it really depends. I mean, so I've done full blue ocean shifts right from start to finish with companies, and it takes it takes a management team to be in a position that they are willing to try. That's the first thing, okay? Because it's different. It's so different to how you would normally do a strategic plan or strategy formulation. So for me, it's about the first of all, the organization's got to be bought into it. So when it's a large organization, you know, you need someone like the CEO obviously involved in that, and they need to be brought into this process and see value from it. But I've also done it where I've just brought the tools in. So I've worked with clients where I've just ran sessions on, okay, let's map out where you are currently in the business and let's hold a workshop around that. Let's look at your portfolio and figure out where you need to think about focusing on a business strategy, not a corporate strategy. And this is how I use it. So yeah, it's again, I've used it across organizations with only 30 people in it, and I've used organizations who have got thousands of people in it. But it's a toolkit for me. It's a toolkit. It's like anything. I just pull in my bag and I pull out what's important, what's relevant to the client.
Fantastic. So I like one slide from your presentation. So you said you can eliminate or reduce some of the features or some of the offerings you do from the standard industry. I think that's fantastic point. Can you just elaborate a little on that? Mhm. You have a
Yeah,
couple.
because you could eliminate it or reduce something because we make this preconceived assumption because something's always been done that way or customers have always, you know, if you take Netflix, okay, very basic example, but we take Netflix and Blockbuster videos. Well, an example of that, what did Netflix eliminate? They eliminated late delivery fees. They eliminated in time, anyway, not at the start, but they eliminated when they went to a digital offering, having to actually go and take the DVD back and post it. That was eliminated. So that was another one. And then also, there's other things to think about. I'm just seeing a question on there. How one question, one at a time. Tesla. Yes, so Tesla was in the blue ocean. Now it's in the red. Okay, yes, it's true. It's exactly what I said on the talk. With the question that you've put there, a blue ocean is no longer blue after a while
Yeah,
because
after a while.
competitors are always going to take it. So for me, how you sustain that is constantly monitoring what's happening in the market and the world and with customers, and you do all this and you monitor it a bit like you would if anyone's familiar with scenarios and how you monitor signals, and you do the same thing and you start looking around and then you review your blue ocean strategy every, you know, whatever the timeline is and what you're trying to do.
That is very important. Yeah.
Hugely
So,
important to monitor weak signals of the
yeah,
market.
so everybody jump into that once it is not a red ocean. Okay, so people start looking at it, and then maybe they just the blue become red again. Okay, so
It's,
you have to. It's like an ongoing process. It is not required that you can completely change. It is not required. So you can change some part of it and make it attractive for one segment of customers.
yeah, I
That's
mean, think of, you know, airlines is a good example, which is always used in blue ocean literature. But if you think of airlines, you think of low cost airlines. Think of as Indigo in India. Indigo, I think, is an airline, isn't it, or Indiago or something. Well, they're very similar to Southwest Airlines in the United States.
yeah.
So you know they're totally different to Air India as an example, because Air India probably focuses on all the different factors where they don't. You know, they have quicker turnaround times. They don't serve meals on the plane. They don't do this. They don't do that. Ryanair in the UK, which is obviously a big airline in the UK, you know, you don't have seats. We have seats, but you don't have seat allocation. Sorry, I should say, put it like that. You don't have seat allocations. You just first on, first served. Okay. These are things they've reduced, okay, because customers weren't that interested in certain things. They're looking more for price potentially or more availability of flights. So again, another example of how airline use it, and you can do it for anything.
Fantastic. So I think there is one question for you. Yeah, I think you can read it. So one question
I've answered that one already. So yeah, one question, one at a time. Tesla in blue ocean, now Tesla's in the red ocean. How do you sustain the blue ocean? Yeah, so exactly what I said. You've got to monitor your signals. You've got to review that on maybe a quarterly basis and see what's happening in the market, what's going on. A bit like indicators. Like if you're working risk, you have risk indicators where you start looking at different areas. And then, yeah, you start thinking, okay, maybe our ocean is becoming redder. If it is, we do another blue ocean shift and we start thinking about how we can compete on certain factors. And those factors depends on the brand and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, perfect. So even though the thinking about blue oceans and how it helps for your business is an ongoing process, but usually organizations try to do a strategy refresh and the third quarter or the second quarter or third quarter or fourth quarter of the year, right? So at that time, do you think it is advisable to even look for this kind of a blue ocean strategy analysis, or what do you think? So
It
how do you
depends.
usually encourage to?
Yeah, it depends on where they are in that. Because one of the problems with strategies is that although we know a 5-year strategy is no longer around anymore, you have to refresh it. But one of the problems businesses have is they do a strategy, but they don't give it enough time to actually succeed. They change all the time. So I think
Yeah,
with Blue Ocean, I think to me, Blue Ocean is about, you need to ask yourself a question in that strategy review. You know, is the strategy working? Is it heading in the right direction? Is our hypothesis, is our cause and effect actually working? And is our market still there, or is it a market we want to work in still there? And if it's not, maybe we start thinking about using a tool like Blue Ocean to start exploring the market or markets. Or maybe we pick certain businesses out of our portfolio, which are going to help us do this. And we do that. We call them sprints. We do sprint process. Inside that, we have multiple business units and we run Blue Ocean shifts events. That's
okay.
how we do it. But yeah.
So that's an excellent. Yeah. So I think let us try to conclude the session. So any key takeaways, Andrew, from your side to the audience?
Yeah, I think first of all, first of all, you probably can't go to, if you're a manager in a business and you're not the CEO of the company, and you can't go to your management and think, let's implement Blue Ocean strategy as a whole company to start off with. I would think about piloting it in a certain area, a business unit or something like that, or a product as a service where you notice that there's a decline in profit or in customers or anything like that, or market share. First thing I would do. And then secondly, I think, or second point is use the tools like a toolbox. Like I said, pull out the strategy canvas, start thinking about your factors you're competing on the market, and then start mapping them. And then thirdly, don't forget customers. It's the thing we should hear about every time, but it's amazing. Even though we all know we should speak to customers, a lot of businesses still make a lot of assumptions and they just often do things. We should actually make an assumption, speak to those users as customers and really gain those insights.
Perfect.
So 3 points, I would say.
Perfect. Excellent summarization. Andrew, thank you very much for a wonderful lecture. And it has been, we are waiting for this session for quite a long time. So last time we met you. Okay.
I was sick, wasn't I? So yeah, completely.
So thank you, Andrew. Wonderful lecture. So very insightful. So thank you. And then look forward for more such an
100%.
lecture from your side. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Thanks. Bye bye.